Welcome back to Leadership in Criminal Justice. In our first week, we explored the nature of leadership, the characteristics of effective leaders, and why leadership matters in criminal justice organizations. This week, we're shifting our focus from who leaders are to what leaders actually do. Today's lecture is about leadership behaviors, the daily actions that separate effective leaders from ineffective ones. You'll discover that great leadership isn't just about personality or charisma. It is about the choices leaders make every day through their communication, decision-making, and interactions with others. By the end of this lecture, you'll be able to evaluate leadership behaviors that promote ethical policing and community trust, and you'll begin thinking about how these behaviors can improve officer morale, operational efficiency, and public accountability. So, an opening reflection. I'd like you to start by thinking about the best supervisor, coach, teacher, military leader, or manager you've ever had. What made them stand out? Maybe they listened to you when others didn't. Maybe they were fair. Maybe they treated everyone with respect. Maybe they held everyone accountable equally. Or maybe they simply inspired you because they practiced what they preached. Now ask yourself another question. Were those qualities personality traits, or were they behaviors? That's one of the most important distinctions that we will make today. So, today's discussion supports two of our weekly learning outcomes. First, we're going to evaluate leadership behaviors that help build ethical policing and strengthen community trust. Second, we'll begin thinking strategically about how leaders can improve officer morale, organizational effectiveness, and public accountability through everyday actions. Those aren't abstract concepts. They're skills that you'll apply whether you become a police officer, investigator, correctional supervisor, attorney, probation officer, or any other type of administrator. So the foundation, and one of the biggest misconceptions about leadership, is that people follow titles. That's not true. They don't. People may comply with authority because they have to, but they choose to trust leaders because of how those leaders behave. Every interaction sends a message. How you communicate during a briefing, how you respond when someone makes a mistake, whether you give credit to others, whether you stay calm under pressure. These behaviors shape how people perceive your leadership. Leadership isn't something that you demonstrate once during a crisis. It is something that you demonstrate every single day. So, last week we discussed traits like confidence, integrity, and intelligence. Those characteristics certainly matter, but behaviors are different. Traits describe who you are. Behaviors describe what you do. The encouraging part is that behavior can be learned. You may not naturally be the most outgoing person in the room, but you can learn to communicate more effectively. You can become a better listener. You can improve your decision making. You can learn how to coach employees rather than simply criticize them. Leadership behaviors are developed through intentional practice. So let's look at what I call the leadership impact chain. Leadership behaviors influence organizational culture, and culture influences employee performance. Performance influences the quality of services that are provided to the public. Ultimately, those outcomes affect community trust. Think about that for a moment. Something as simple as how a supervisor conducts a morning briefing can influence officer morale. Officer morale affects performance. Performance affects citizen interactions. Citizen interactions influence public confidence in an agency. And leadership creates a ripple effect. So what are leadership behaviors? Leadership behaviors are the observable actions leaders take to influence, motivate, and guide others towards accomplishing organizational goals. Some examples include listening carefully before making decisions, communicating expectations clearly, providing constructive feedback, recognizing outstanding performance, holding employees accountable in a fair way, These behaviors happen every day as a leader. And because they happen every day, they have a tremendous power to shape organizational culture. So there are two categories of leadership behaviors. And this is done from researchers that research this. There are task-oriented behaviors, and then there are relationship-oriented behaviors. Neither category is more important than the other. Successful leaders know how to balance both of them. So let's start with an in-depth discussion of task behaviors. So task-oriented leaders focus on accomplishing the mission. They plan, they organize, they establish priorities, they assign responsibilities, they monitor progress, they make decisions. Imagine you're supervising a patrol shift. A task-oriented leader ensures everyone knows what their assignments, that their equipment is ready, that reports are complete by the end of shift, and contingency plans are in place. Without these behaviors, confusion can develop quickly. Public safety organizations simply cannot function effectively without a strong task leadership. So here's your real-world application. And imagine that a patrol sergeant conducts a shift briefing. The briefing lasts only 10 minutes. During that time, the sergeant discusses recent crime trends, officer safety concerns, wanted suspects, staffing assignments, and community events. That preparation isn't something that's glamorous, but it saves lives. Good planning reduces confusion, clear communication reduces mistakes, and preparation creates confidence. And this is leadership in action. So relationship-oriented behaviors. These are relationship behaviors. These focus on people rather than tasks. And you've heard me say that leadership is about the people. Effective leaders listen. Effective leaders coach and mentor. Effective leaders recognize achievements, and they support employee wellness. Effective leaders build trust. The law enforcement career, it can be emotionally demanding and emotionally draining. Officers are going to experience trauma, stress, and fatigue. Relationship-oriented leaders recognize that taking care of people is essential to accomplishing their mission. Employees who feel respected are generally more engaged. They are more committed and more willing to support ongoing organizational goals. So let's apply these concepts. Officer Smith has been arriving late for work. His reports are incomplete, and his attitude has changed. Some supervisors immediately will choose discipline. Some supervisors will actually ignore the issue, hoping it goes away. A more effective leader begins by asking a question. What has changed? Perhaps Officer Smith is experiencing burnout. Maybe there's a family crisis. Perhaps he's struggling with something no one else knows about. Great leaders seek understanding before judgment. That doesn't eliminate accountability at all. It simply ensures that the accountability is fair and it is informed. So coaching is one of the most overlooked leadership behaviors, and it is oh so important. Coaching doesn't mean lowering standards. It means helping people succeed. A supervisor who coaches employees develops future leaders. A supervisor who only disciplines often creates fear rather than improvement. One of my favorite leadership reminders is this: people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. That doesn't mean leaders avoid difficult conversations. It means that those conversations are rooted in respect and professionalism. So we're going to look at some research. Leadership research has been studying these types of behaviors for decades. The Ohio State Leadership Study identified two primary dimensions of leadership. The first was initiating structure. This involves planning, organizing, defining roles, and establishing expectations. The second was consideration. This focuses on trust, respect, communication, and concern for employees. The most effective leaders demonstrate both of these, because strong leadership requires both structure and it requires relationships. I like to think of it as you can't do one without the other. And then we're going to look at the Michigan leadership studies. So the Michigan leadership studies, they've reached a similar conclusion. That's how you know the studies are right. These researchers compared employee-centered leaders with production-centered leaders. Employee-centric leaders, they emphasize communication, teamwork, and employee development. Production-centered leaders focus almost exclusively on output. Today's research suggests that organizations perform best when leaders balance operational effectiveness with a genuine concern for their employees. This is going back to that remark earlier in week 1 that leadership is about the people. Think about it. Your people are not cogs in a machine. So now looking at leadership in modern policing. So modern policing, it's different. We know it's hard. It requires much more than enforcement of laws. Communities expect professionalism. They expect transparency, procedural justice, fairness, and ethical decision-making. Strong leadership behaviors help agencies build legitimacy and public trust. Internally, these same behaviors improve officer morale and accountability. Leadership influences both the organization and the community that it serves. So consider the transformation of the Camden County Police Department in New Jersey. As part of a broader organizational reform, leaders place a stronger emphasis on community engagement, officer accountability, training, and communication. While many factors contributed to the department's evolution, leadership behaviors played an important role in shaping organizational culture and community relationships. This reminds us that leadership is not just about policies. It is about how leaders consistently interact with both the employees and the public. So let's talk about some warning signs. Poor leadership behaviors can have serious consequences for an agency. It can result in low morale, poor communication between leadership and employees, inconsistent discipline, which leads the organization open to lawsuits, high turnover, and reduced public confidence. Many organizational problems begin long before this crisis occurs. They develop through repeated negative behaviors that slowly erode trust. But it's also important to note that culture does not change overnight. It is built or damaged through daily leadership choices. So here's a reflection. I want you to take a moment to reflect, and you can leave the comments below. Which leadership behaviors do you think create trust? Which behaviors destroy trust? More importantly, what kind of leader do you want to become? Leadership begins long before you receive a promotion. It begins with the behaviors that you practice today. So here's an application exercise. Imagine you're a patrol sergeant again. Officer morale is low, the citizen complaints are increasing, and tomorrow morning is your first briefing. What are the first 3 leadership behaviors that you're going to want to demonstrate? Are you going to want to listen? Will you want to communicate your expectations? Will you recognize good work? Will you establish accountability? Think about your answer, because this is exactly the type of decision effective leaders have to make every day. So let's talk about some key takeaways. Leadership is behavior. Behavior shapes culture. Culture influences performance. Performance affects community trust. These concepts form the foundation of effective leadership in a criminal justice organization. And you can see that they all are connected. In our next lecture, we're going to examine leadership styles. We'll explore why effective leaders don't rely on just one approach. Instead, they learn to adapt their leadership style based on the people they lead and the situations they face. I will see you in the next video.